You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter @RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans. Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. The last Tuesday edition of this show. I am the Jacob Valk, except no imitation. I've got to start with college basketball. I'm not going to talk about MLB, CBA discussions. Even though it seems like we're close to a deal, I don't want to talk about it until it's finalized. Then I'll go over all the big points that you need to know. But I'll start with college basketball. It is March 1st, so even though there are no great teams this year, you gotta start with college basketball. There was a game yesterday featuring two top 20 teams. Baylor went to Austin. They stayed in the state of Texas to face the Longhorns. The Bears emerged victorious, 68-61. An impressive win for Baylor. I'll give them credit. Any win that they pull off without guys like Chamwa Chachua and Cryer are really impressive because those are two of their best players. I mean, give Adam Flagler and James Akinjo credit. They both had 19 points. Flo Thamba had 12 points, was very active defensively. I liked what I saw from him. I liked what I saw from Kendall Brown. Good win for Baylor, but a really tough loss for Texas. This was a winnable game for them, and they just choked it away. Texas shot just 4 for 23 from beyond the arc. The simple fact is, you're not going to win doing that. Alright, that's an inexcusable performance. If you're a Longhorns fan, you've got to be really ticked off at this loss, because this was a winnable game that you just choked away. This game was tied at 54 with under 5.5 minutes left in the game. Then Baylor outscored Texas 14-7. By the time Texas scored their first basket, after they were tied at 54, the score was 63-56, with 98 seconds left in the game. I mean, Texas was up at the half. They had a real chance to win this game. They just blew it. Andrew Jones was abysmal. 0 for 7 from beyond the arc. Jace Febris 1 for 6 from beyond the arc. I understand that those guys aren't great three-point shooters, but if they're going to combine for 13 three-point attempts in the same game, they need to combine for more than just one made three. Alright? That's not going to work. Give Christian Bishop and Marcus Carr credit. They both played really well. They both had 13 points. Bishop had 11 rebounds. Timmy Allen had 10 points and 7 rebounds. But at the end of the day, this was a winnable game for Texas that they just blew. You know, it's kind of funny. I was watching Pardon the Interruption yesterday, and Michael Wilbon said, "I'm glad I don't need to pick a college basketball team to trust right now. Ask me in a couple weeks." You could do worse than Baylor. You could do worse than Duke. I understand that it's probably tough to trust Baylor. They won a very losable game. Like, I wasn't in love with how Baylor played yesterday, but give them credit. The Tchamwa Tchatchoua injury really hasn't killed them a lot. They've only lost one game with him out of the rotation this year. And that was at Texas Tech. Texas Tech is not a bad team this year. They're not great, but they're pretty good. I mean, Baylor's a really good team this year, defending national champs. If you wanted to bang your fist on the table for Baylor, I wouldn't hate it. Recency bias may be a thing here, but I don't think I would hate it. As for Duke, never discount a team that's playing for something extra. You know that the Hollywood movie of Coach K's life would end with him winning another national title. You know that Duke would love nothing more than to send off one of the best coaches in college basketball history, if not the best coach in college basketball history, off into the sunset with his 6th national title. And also, think about this. Krzyzewski won 2 national titles in the 90s, won 1 in the 2000s, and won 2 last decade. So if Krzyzewski wins March Madness next month, he will become the only coach in college basketball history to win a national title in 4 different decades. John Wooden only won in 2 decades, the 60s and 70s. Adolph Rupp only won in 2 decades, the 40s and 50s. Bob Knight only won in 2, the 70s and 80s. Roy Williams only won in 2, the 2000s and the 2010s. Jim Calhoun won in 3, the 90s, the 2000s, and the 2010s. I'm telling you, the Hollywood movie would end with Coach K winning this year. Not impossible. I mean, I'd love to see Gonzaga finally get over the hump. I'd love to see Arizona win. But I really think we're going to get this team that comes out of nowhere that's going to win the whole thing. I think that's what this college basketball season is leading to. But now it's time to preview a few games between 2 top 25 teams. I'll start with Providence going to Villanova to face the Wildcats. This is a really good Providence team. Like, this is a team that I could see sneaking up on people in March. Like I said, the field is wide open. I think very few people are going to be picking the Friars. Watch out. They're a well-rounded team. Ed Cooley does a great job at that school. They're a very, very well-rounded team. You've got to watch out for guys like Nate Watson, Aljami Durham, Jared Bynum, AJ Reeves, and Noah Horchler. I mean, this is a really experienced Providence team. They're really good. They're good defensively. They're good offensively. The Friars are going to surprise a lot of people in a few weeks, let me tell you. Meanwhile, you look at Villanova. They're a tough team to get a handle on. They're very streaky. Some games they look great. Other games they look really, really bad. I mean, it really lives or dies with Colin Gillespie. When Gillespie is on, Nova is close to unbeatable. When he's off, they're really bad. But keep an eye out also for guys like Justin Moore, Jermaine Samuels, Eric Dixon, Caleb Daniels, and Brandon Slater. I've said this before about Nova. They're a top-heavy team. Like, realistically, in the big dance, only those 6 guys should get minutes. I don't want to see Brian Antoine get too many minutes. I don't want to see Chris Arcidiacono get too many minutes. I don't want to see Jordan Longino get too many minutes. This is a top-heavy Nova team. They are not well-rounded. Providence is. I like the Friars more than I like the Wildcats this year. So I'm going to go with Providence. Moving on now to Purdue, Wisconsin. This Purdue team is all offense, no defense. They're led by guys like Jaden Ivey, Zach Edey, Travion Williams, and Sasha Stefanovic. Meanwhile, the Badgers are basically the polar opposite. They try to win games by utilizing their great defense. Johnny Davis is a great offensive player. He's putting up over 20 points this year and over 8 rebounds. But he is a force on the defensive end. He's averaging 1.2 steals per game and 0.7 blocks per game. Brad Davison does a good job of getting into the passing lanes. Same thing with a guy like Tyler Wall, who's also really good at blocking shots. Chris Vogt can get into the passing lanes also. Davison, Wall, Stephen Crowell, and Chucky Hepburn are good offensive players. You know, it's tough to get a handle on this Wisconsin team. It really is. Because, yes, they're all defense, no offense, but they have one of the best offensive players in the nation in Johnny Davis. I mean, Davis is just dominating in the Big Ten. And a stacked Big Ten at that. They're going to have a lot of teams in the big dance. Wisconsin, Purdue, Illinois, OSU, Iowa, Michigan State. all 6 of those teams are probably going to get in. I'm not saying they all should, but they all probably will. The thing is, though, I think Purdue's offense is going to be too much for Wisconsin. While their defense is really good, it's not great. Purdue does have a great offense. They have 4 players capable of going off on any given night. That's going to be too much for Wisconsin. Give me the Boilermakers. The last game to preview is Arizona USC. I hope you stay up for this game, because it's going to be a great game. These are 2 teams that you probably haven't seen a lot, but they are both capable of going on a big run in March. I've spoken about Arizona before. They're a very deep team. They have 7 players averaging at least 7 points per game. There aren't too many teams that have that this year. I mean, when you look at guys like Benedict Mathurin, Azuolas Tubelis, Christian Coloco, Kerr Krissa, Dalen Terry, Umar Ballo, and Pelly Larson, you can see why the Wildcats have the 3rd best offense in the nation in terms of points per game. And their defense isn't bad either. Like, I may have been a little too hard on Arizona yesterday, because they are a really good team. They're a very deep team. Tommy Lloyd has done an excellent job in his first season there, taking over for Sean Miller, who had just worn out his welcome in Arizona. Lloyd comes in, no one knows anything about him, and now he's leading Arizona to one of their best seasons ever. In all fairness to the Wildcats, they're 25-3. You take a look at their 3 losses. At Tennessee, at UCLA, and at Colorado. Tennessee's a really good team this year. Same thing with UCLA. Colorado, that's an inexcusable loss, but at the end of the day, any team can be better than any other team on any given day of the week. So, I probably shouldn't have killed Arizona too much for that loss. They do need to rebound here and beat USC. I understand that the Trojans are a really good team this year, with guys like Isaiah Mobley, Drew Peterson, Boogie Ellis, Chavez Goodwin, and Max Agbonkpolo. They're also very well-rounded defensively. I love Andy Enfield's system. If he gets players to buy into that system, the Trojans are really good. When he doesn't, that's when USC struggles. In order for Arizona to be taken seriously, they need to win this game. It's a tough ask for them to go into Southern California and beat USC in LA. Alright, you know that Trojans fans are going to be out in force to support their team. But Arizona really needs to show why they're still the 2nd-ranked team in the nation, even though they lost to a bad Colorado team. This is a really important game for both teams. Arizona needs to show that they can go on the road and beat a really good team. Meanwhile, USC needs to show that they should be taken seriously as a March Madness contender. I've said this a million times. The field is wide open this year. Could a team like USC come out of nowhere and win the whole thing? Yeah. The answer is yes. They could. There are a lot of teams capable of doing that this year. Realistically, you'll probably be able to make a case for like 20 teams to win it all this year. Maybe more. There's no one great team this year. We've got a bunch of really good teams. So with that comes a massive influx of teams that are capable of going on a 6-game winning streak. At the end of the day, that's all you need to do in March. Unless you're a first 4 team, it doesn't matter if you lose that last game of the season. All you need to do, once the lights are on bright, is go on a 6-game winning streak. It's a lot easier said than done because you're going up against great teams that you haven't seen all year. But again, this field is so wide open. There are a lot of teams capable of doing that. You know, last year we said, can this team get past Baylor or Gonzaga or Iowa or Michigan? Now when we ask that question about teams like Gonzaga, Arizona, Baylor, Duke, Auburn, Kansas, etc., the answer is yes. They are capable of getting past those teams. Any team is. All in all, this is an incredibly important game for both teams. I know I said that before. I'll say it again. I could really see either team winning it. I think Arizona is the better team, but they are vulnerable on the road. I'm going to pick the Wildcats here, but I'm not 100% confident in that pick. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if USC won. Alright, now I'll give you some NBA Vault talk. And I'll start with Spurs Grizzlies. Specifically, the epic performance from Ja Morant. This was a game for the ages. This was one of the most dominant performances by any NBA player this year. He had highlight after highlight after highlight after highlight. From a ridiculously deep 3 to posterizing Jakob Poeltl. He sent that guy in a next week, let me tell you. That was one of the most vicious dunks of the season. Put Morant in the dunk contest, please. To a crazy buzzer-beating shot with 0.4 of a second left, catching it in midair, heaving up a shot, and it somehow went in, to breaking the record for most points by a Grizzly in a game with 52. This was one of the best games that you can possibly have. And for whatever it's worth, the previous record holder, for most points in a game by a Grizzly? Ja Morant. You know when he set that record? 3 days ago. It took Ja Morant 2 days to break his own record for most points by a Grizzly in a single game. The record now is 52. Morant put up 46 against the Bulls on Saturday. He only needed 2 days to drop 50. 52 to be specific. For whatever it's worth, the record holder for most points in a game by a Grizzly out of anyone not named Ja Morant is Mike Miller. He put up 45 points on February 21st, 2007. Funnily enough, the Grizzlies lost that game to the Warriors 118 to 115 in overtime. For a while, I've said that the Western Conference is really just a 2-team race between the Suns and the Warriors. I can't say that anymore. The Grizzlies are 8-2 in their last 10. Ja Morant is playing absolutely insane basketball. Dillon Brooks is going to come back sooner rather than later. Let's put some respect on the Grizzlies' name here. It would not surprise me at all if the Grizzlies represented the West in the NBA Finals. When they're at full strength, the way Ja Morant is playing, you add Dillon Brooks to a core with Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson, Brandon Clark, and Steven Adams. That's insane. That's a core that's capable of winning an NBA title. The way that Ja Morant is playing right now, you can't put anything past him. And you know what? I'll even go a step further. The New Orleans Pelicans made a terrible mistake in taking Zion Williamson over Ja Morant. I understand that Zion has been incredible whenever he's been on the floor. Alright, the guy averaged 27 points last year. He was an all-star. He's averaging just under 26 points in his career. I get that. But part of being great is staying healthy. And Zion Williamson has not done that. Plus, you heard the stuff about a week or two ago from JJ Redick saying that Zion isn't a great teammate. He should have reached out to CJ McCollum a lot sooner. I think we can all agree on this. The New Orleans Pelicans would be better than 25-36 and hanging on for dear life to that final spot in the play-in tournament if they had taken Ja Morant instead of Zion Williamson. I understand that Zion was the lock, stock, and barrel first overall pick, and you weren't gonna pass on him. Alright, it would have been like passing on Joe Burrow in his NFL draft. You weren't gonna be the guy to do that. Or passing on Trevor Lawrence in his NFL draft. Say what you want about Urban Meyer, but He knew enough to take Trevor Lawrence. I understand that Zion was viewed as the can't-miss guy. The thing is, though, Ja Morant right now is the better player. There is no question about that. I mean, let's keep this in mind. Williamson is now on his third coach. The Pelicans have had to retool the roster a lot to make him successful. And Williamson still hasn't played at all this year. Big men with foot problems get hurt a lot. Greg Oden and Bill Walton, when they were on the floor, were really good players. But once they started getting hurt and their legs gave out from under them, that was it. Let me ask you a question. If I gave you $1 million and you couldn't split it up, you had to bet $1 million on who would make more All-Star games in their career, who would you bet it on right now? Zion or Ja Morant? Your answer better be Ja Morant. You may want to divvy it up, half and half or 60-40. I'm not giving you that option. $1 million that you have to bet on either Zion or Ja. You can't divvy it up. You would need to put that $1 million on Morant. It's just that simple. He's been healthier. His teams have been more successful. Morant has been in the playoffs. And he's going back to the playoffs this year. Zion hasn't. If we were to redraft that 2019 draft, Ja Morant goes 1. It's just that simple. Zion probably goes 2. Because say what you want about guys like R.J. Barrett and Darius Garland and Tyler Hero and guys like that, but they're not the game wreckers that Zion is. They're really good players, but they're not great. Zion, when healthy, is great. And while I'm concerned about Zion's future, I'm not giving up on him. He's 21. It would be insane to give up on him right now. But there's no question about it. If I'm building a team from scratch, I'd rather have Ja Morant than Zion Williamson. Moving on now to the Lakers, waiving DeAndre Jordan and him seemingly being destined to be a 76er. And it's kind of funny. People made a big deal about the Lakers bringing in DeAndre Jordan. Like, oh, he's going to be such a perfect fit. Anthony Davis isn't going to have to play the 5 as much. He doesn't like playing the 5, so he'll be great now. DeAndre Jordan and Dwight Howard are going to be really good together. Meanwhile, I'm saying Jordan's over the hill. He's done. His best days are behind him. No one saw him more than me when he was with the Nets. You didn't need to be a genius to figure out that this guy was way, way, way past his prime. I mean, Jordan was terrible for the Lakers, fell out of their rotation, did nothing defensively. I don't want to say he's a big reason why the Lakers are where they are right now, but you can't deny that some of the big moves that Rob Pelinka made in the offseason, bringing in Jordan, bringing in Dwight Howard, bringing in Kendrick Nunn, trading for Westbrook, didn't work. Season ends today. The Lakers are going up against the Pelicans in the play-in tournament. The Pelicans could beat the Lakers in that one game very easily. So now Jordan's a Sixer. It's kind of interesting. They trade Andre Drummond in the James Harden deal, and they replace Drummond with a similar player. Drummond is a million times better than DeAndre Jordan right now, but they both play close to the basket. Their interior presences, their games are similar. Drummond is better, but their games are very, very similar. I'll say this, though. When James Harden and DeAndre Jordan were Nets, they did not get along. Harden got on Jordan a lot. His lack of effort defensively ticked off Harden. The two of them didn't get along. Now they're reuniting? How's that going to work? You gotta think Harden gave his blessing to this move, because if he didn't, given who James Harden is, I could very easily see this ticking him off. I mean, it makes sense in a bubble. You move on from Andre Drummond, so you bring in a poor man's replacement in Jordan. That's all well and good. And I don't mind a starting five of Harden, Green, Thibault, Harris, and Embiid to go along with a bench of Maxey, Korkmaz, Niang, Millsap, and Jordan. It's also possible that the Sixers just view Jordan as like the 11th guy off the bench, and he's not going to get a ton of minutes. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. The move does make sense for the Sixers in a bubble. I'm just concerned about the relationship between Harden and Jordan. Realize, it did not work out with them in Brooklyn. And don't tell me that Harden was unhappy in Brooklyn. Alright? Last year he was. He just did not get along with DeAndre Jordan. I'm not sure reuniting them is the right move. Alright, now I'll give you some MLB Valk talk. Once again, not on the CBA, but on the Yankees finally filling their void on their coaching staff. If you'll recall, Eric Chavez was set to be their assistant hitting coach along with Casey Dykes, helping out Dylan Lawson. But Chavez bailed and went to the Mets as their lead hitting coach. So the Yankees had a vacancy on their coaching staff. We had heard for a while that they wanted to fill it with someone with a lot of playing experience in the majors. Because you look at that coaching staff, there aren't too many MLB veterans. Obviously, you have Aaron Boone. Travis Chapman had a cup of coffee for the 03 Phillies. Mike Harkey was a pitcher for a good chunk of the 90s, so the Yankees at least had that. But that was it. It was right for the Yankees to want to bring in an experienced major leaguer. Well, they didn't really do that, but they brought in an experienced coach. Hensley Mullins is now the Yankees' new assistant hitting coach. If that name sounds familiar to you, it should be. Bam Bam was a Yankee from 89 to 93, although he never got into 100 games in a season for the Bombers. In fact, his playing career comprises only 182 games. So he is not an experienced big leaguer. What he is an experienced big league coach. This guy was hitting coach for the Giants from 2010 to 2019, so he has 3 World Series rings. He even interviewed for the Yankees managerial job before Aaron Boone got it. So now Boone is bringing in one of the people that he beat out for the job as one of his assistants. In 2020, Mullins was Mets' bench coach. He took a year off last year. Now he's back in the majors. Him and Luis Rojas are together again. In all seriousness, this move makes a ton of sense. Mullins has a wealth of experience, was an excellent hitting coach for the Giants, won 3 World Series. He could have been Yankees manager, taking over for Girardi, and no one would have had much of a problem with it. Yankees fans like it when you bring in former Yankees as coaches. A lot of people got a kick out of seeing Mel Stottlemyre as a pitching coach. Or Ron Guidry as pitching coach, even though that didn't go well at all. But even going back to guys like Don Mattingly and Willie Randolph and Lee Mazzilli and Marcus Timms and Rich Monteleone and Roy White and guys like that, Yankees fans like it when former Yankees become their coaches. And if you're a Yankees fan of a certain age, you remember Bam Bam. You probably don't have fond memories of him. It's not like he was a great player or anything like that, but you probably remember seeing him on the 91 Yankees. If you're of a certain age, as a utility guy who could play both corner outfield positions, could also play first if you needed him to. And again, he brings a wealth of experience. Great hitting coach. Knows Luis Rojas. And one other thing, Dylan Lawson has never been a major league hitting coach before. So bringing in someone like Mullins who knows what it takes to be a successful hitting coach in the majors, that makes a ton of sense. This is a great move by the Yankees. It's not too often you can say this, but good job, Aaron Boone. Alright, now I'll give you some NHL Valk talk. Specifically on the Blackhawks removing the interim tag from Kyle Davidson and making him the full-time GM. For Blackhawks fans' sakes, I am happy that they went with Davidson. Some of the people that were being interviewed for this job had no business being interviewed for this job. I'm talking people from Major League Baseball, I think from the National Football League or the National Basketball Association. It was just strange. It was a wide-ranging search, which I guess is good, but keep it within the NHL. Or at the very least, within the NHL family. If you want to go to like the AHL or Canadian hockey or a broadcaster, okay. You want to bring in an agent, I'm fine with that, but not a different sport. That would not have worked. That would have been a terrible decision. Instead, you promote Davidson, someone who's been with the Blackhawks since 2010, worked his way up from being an intern to being assistant to the GM, to being assistant GM. Now he's the full-time GM. It'll be interesting to see what Davidson does. The Blackhawks should blow things up. Their window to win passed a long time ago. But their most appealing trade pieces are older players. Guys like Marc-Andre Fleury and Patrick Kane. Even Jonathan Toews when he comes back. Seth Jones you've got to throw in there also. Maybe Calvin DeHaan. It'll be interesting to see if Davidson chooses to blow things up radically or just retool a little bit. And I'll be really excited to see if he keeps Derek King or not. I mean, King has not set the world on fire since taking over for Jeremy Colleton. But he also hasn't been dreadful. The Blackhawks under Colleton this year were 1-9-2. Under King, they've gone 18-6. So not impressive, but certainly not terrible. I'll be very curious to see what Davidson does. But I think the Blackhawks made a smart decision here. I think Davidson will work out. He knows the organization inside and out. Maybe you would have liked the Blackhawks to go outside the organization, seeing as though why they fired Stan Bowman, his failure to report alleged sexual assault. If you wanted to go outside the organization and remove that stain fully, I wouldn't have minded that, but staying in-house and promoting someone who worked his way from the ground up within the Blackhawks organization makes sense too. I don't mind this move. It makes sense. Good job by the Blackhawks. They could have done a lot worse, let me tell you. If they had gone outside the sport, I would have been killing that move. I'll close this show out with some NFL Valk talk. Specifically on the Jaguars re-signing Tyler Shatley. They re-signed him to a 2-year deal that can be worth up to $6.8 million. And this is a good move for the Jaguars. Shatley is a solid center. Not a great one. You can do better, but you can also do a lot worse. Like, this contract gives the Jaguars the flexibility to name him the starter, which wouldn't be terrible, but they could also name him the backup. I'd really, really like that. Last year, according to Pro Football Focus, Shatley had a 60.7 overall grade. The year before that, he had a 67.7 overall grade. He didn't allow a sack last year. Only allowed 2 sacks the year prior. He can play both guard positions in a pinch. This move makes sense for the Jaguars. The number one thing for the Jaguars this year has to be propping up Trevor Lawrence. And part of the way you do that is by beefing up his O-line. That's why you've seen guys like Evan Neal and Ikem Ekwonu as possible first overall picks, even though they're clearly inferior prospects to Kayvon Thibodeau and Aiden Hutchinson. This is a good move by the Jaguars. It makes a ton of sense. In a perfect world, Shatley wouldn't start, but if he does, okay, I don't mind that. You have bigger fish to fry on the O-line anyway, if you're the Jaguars. You've got to beef up the right side of the line. Ben Barch and Jawan Taylor aren't terrible, but they're not great. There's nothing wrong with having great offensive line depth. Those guys take a beating every play, so if someone gets hurt, you better have someone ready to fill that void. But re-signing Shatley makes a ton of sense. This is a good move for the Jaguars. I like it a lot. Until tomorrow, I'm Jacob Valk, and always remember, if you disagree with me, you're wrong.